And the President and Mrs. Kennedy had become so popular, not only in America, but also around the world. And Clint, we're going to go through a few slides as we lead into what happened in Dallas in 1963. Explain to us what we're seeing in these slides around the world.
This is the President's visit to Ireland. You can see the crowds there. You see the people hanging out windows, open windows all the way around. That was typical. Massive crowds no matter where we went. This is in Costa Rica. The military had a hard time controlling the people. It was very difficult for them. This is the President back here. This is in Mexico City. That's not snow. That's confetti. It was so thick that the car was filled right up to the top of the seats by the time we got to the end of the motorcade. Then this is Billings, Montana, which was typical in the United States. Somebody has taken their child and passed him across the top of the crowd so that the President can touch the child or the child can touch the President. That was very typical. This is in Berlin, Germany. This is the President with Willy Brandt and Konrad Adenauer. But you notice these two females had broken through the security line and gone toward the car. The agents are trying to repel them.
And this was typical.
This is what happened all the time. And then this is at the speech site in Berlin, where the President declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner." And you notice people on rooftops hanging out of windows, windows open all over the place. There were more than 1 million people there at this speech site. But I just wanted you to get the idea that this is typical of the situation that existed during that period of time.
And President Kennedy realized that in order to get reelected, although he was popular, there was still, he had been elected by a very slim margin, and he knew that he was going to have to get 2 key states in 1964 in order to be reelected, and those states were Florida and Texas.
That's correct. He needed those electoral votes, and so first President Kennedy wanted to go into Florida, and he went into Palm Beach, Cape Canaveral, Tampa, and Miami. When he got to Tampa, they had a 26-mile motorcade there, and the agent that was doing the advance realized that the agents couldn't work the car for 26 total miles, so he put them up on the back of the car like this. Well, during the process of motorcade, the crowds dropped off. The President turned around and noticed the agents there, tapped the agent in the right front seat, who happens to be sitting there, said, "Will you please get those Ivy League charlatans off the back of the car, please?" Well, we didn't know what he meant for sure about Ivy League charlatans, but we sure as hell knew what he meant by get off the back of the car. And so that's what they did eventually. And at the finish of the motorcade, the President came to the advance man and the senior agent and said, "Look, we're going into a campaign year. I do not want it to appear that there's anything between the people and myself. I want them to feel that I'm accessible. Therefore, I don't want the agents on the back of the car unless it's an absolute necessity." And it wasn't in Tampa, he said. And so from now on, try and stay off the back of the car. The word went out all over. And so the trip was scheduled to leave Washington on Thursday, November 21st, fly down to San Antonio, do a dedication of a hospital there, fly over to Houston, do a fundraiser, and speak to a LULAC group, a Hispanic-speaking group, fly to Fort Worth, stay overnight, and the first thing the next morning, he was to speak outside the hotel there in Fort Worth. And it was raining lightly at 8:30 when he went out to make this speech. So we then flew from Fort Worth on over to Love Field in Dallas.
And we're going to show you a video and just walk us through so you can get a sense of what it was like as they landed in Dallas, which Fort Worth to Dallas was really not that far of a distance.
No, we could have driven to where our destination was, the Trade Mart, or be much faster by car instead of flying over. Here you see them coming off the aircraft to be greeted by officials there in Dallas, the mayor and his wife, Mayor McCubbin, and she was presented with some red roses. The President saw that there was a crowd along the fence line, so he immediately turned and started to go to that crowd. Normally she wouldn't have done that, but since she was going to contribute to this campaign, she just went right along and did the same thing. She was shaking hands as we walked down the fence line, waiting to get into a car to depart Love Field. The press were having a field day, enjoying the relationship that they were receiving from the crowd there. It was very exuberant, very happy. The crowd was very glad to see them, even though in Dallas there had been some ads in papers and things of that nature that were anti-Kennedy. And yet, as we traveled into downtown Dallas, the crowds became larger and larger. By the time we got down to Main Street, the crowds were so large they were spilling into the street. The driver of the presidential vehicle was trying to keep the president, who was in the right rear, away from the crowd on the right rear side. He put us up against the left side of the car, up against the crowd. That put Mrs. Kennedy right up next to the crowd. So I would jump off the follow-up car, I was in the car right behind the president, and get up on the back of the presidential vehicle. I knew what the standing rule was because of what he had said in Tampa, but I also knew my responsibility, and I wanted to be in very close proximity so to make sure nothing happened. And so as we moved on down the street there in Dallas, you can see people on balconies, windows are open. Now you have to understand, in 1963, central air conditioning wasn't a matter of fact in most of these big buildings. So they did have windows open all the time. And so here I am on the back of the car as we're coming in down Main Street in Dallas. When we got down to the end of Main Street, we were going to have to go into an area called Dealey Plaza. We were going to have to turn right on Houston and then left on Elm. People always say, why didn't you go straight down Main Street? The reason is we want to turn right to go on the Stemmons Freeway to get to our destination, the Trade Mart. And there was a barricade at the end of Main Street preventing us from making that right turn. We couldn't do it. And so we had to turn right on Houston, left on Elm, then we could get to the right to go to the Trade Mart. But that turn onto Elm Street was extremely sharp. And that meant the car had to slow way down as we made that turn. This is a shot showing that I'm scanning to my left, and the other agents are scanning to their right. This is myself here. I was watching the people in the grassy area. I heard an explosive noise over my right rear shoulder, or the right rear of the motorcade. When I heard it, my vision then went from scanning that grassy area toward the noise, which meant I had to pass over the back of the car with my eyes. And I saw what happened in the car. I saw the president grab at his throat. I saw him lurch to his left. I knew he was in trouble. So I jumped and I ran. Then, just before I got to the car, there was a third shot. It hit the president in the head, right up here, upper right rear. It opened up a massive enough wound so that blood, brain material, bone fragments came out of the wound over myself, over the back of the car. As I was getting up in the car, Mrs. Kennedy came up in the trunk. She was trying to retrieve some of the material that came off the president's head. It had gone off to the right rear of the president's car. I grabbed a hold of her, put her back in the seat. When I did that, the president's body fell to its left into her lap. The right side of his face was up. I could see his eyes were fixed. I could see through the skull into the brain area. Most of that material was gone. I assumed it was a fatal wound. I turned, gave a thumbs down to the follow-up car crew to let them know. We screamed at the lead car, get us to a hospital. It was being driven by Chief Curry from Dallas, and he got in front of us and took us to Parkland Hospital. As we traveled, we were going upwards of 80 miles an hour.
And what we're going to show you now is, this is called the Zapruder film, and we're going to show you in real time what happened. This is the only film of the assassination. It's been edited so that the fatal headshot is not being shown. But as you watch this, I just want you to notice how quickly everything happened.
We're going to make a left turn here coming from Houston Street onto Elm Street. There we are coming down Elm. Now just about here he is hit for the first time in the middle of the back, just below the neck, came out out the windpipe area, didn't hit any hard surface. It was not a fatal wound. But then the headshot came, and it was a fatal wound. I got up on top of the car. My objective when I ran was to get up there and form a shield behind President and Mrs. Kennedy to protect them from whoever was trying to do them harm. So I wedged myself in behind the two of them, up on top of the back of the car, got up as high as I could. We were going so fast that I turned my head at one point and my sunglasses flew off.
You were going about 80 miles an hour.
About 80 miles an hour. And I was hanging on, wedged in there as best I could.